to 27 Tips to Rock Your Resume. I'm Madelyn Hammond, and I am so happy to have with me today Angelo D'Agostino, the managing partner of HC Group Advisors. His company's been around for 4 years, but Angelo's been in the HR biz for over 20. He provides clients all the bells and whistles that a full-service HR department would, but without the overhead. He's had some great clients, including Sotheby's, Game Show Network, Warner Music Group, and many others. He also helps individuals with job placement, and I'm just so happy to have reconnected with Angelo. We worked together many years ago, and then through technology found each other, and I'm thrilled he could be with us today. So welcome to our Zooms.
Thank you, Madelyn. Thank you for inviting me. This is fantastic.
You bet. My first question is, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. I think companies during this pandemic are blowing things up. They're restructuring, their budgets are not as much, departments are leaner, they're really taking their time to evaluate what's necessary. Maybe they're not hiring same, but they're looking at things more strategically. There's some covert hiring going on, and I just wondered what thoughts you had on this. And looking for a job, how do you reach out without seeming like you're tone deaf to what's happening?
Yeah. And I think a great question, certainly on topic for what's happening right now. What I'm finding is, in my experience, has been both working in Los Angeles and New York markets primarily, this is when your relationships are more critical than ever. Mm-hmm. It really is about the foundation you've laid down for yourself over your career in whatever respective field that you work in. I feel like it is very easy to seem tone deaf with blind reach outs or, resume attachments and, hey, I'm looking for my next opportunity. Could you help? When everyone is basically in the same boat. I feel like hiring in many cases is at a standstill. And the unfortunate part about that is with the result of that, there is a lot of covert hiring, as you mentioned, where it's a little inside. And I feel like unless you are in the inner sanctum, you're not even being thought of. And that's the truly unfortunate part about it. What we're running into is we have more people unemployed than we have ever seen in our lifetime, and people that are going to be looking for work. And so the onslaught of candidates, or the currency of candidates that is out there right now looking, is just unmanageable. And what I do see are jobs being posted, and they're getting 50, 100, 200, 300 resumes for individual postings. 90% of them are just completely left of spec and not at all in line with what people are looking for. But people are so desperate to get back into the workforce, they're looking for an entry point in many cases.
Right.
And the unfortunate part about that is there are going to be those that fall by the way and are victims to what's happening currently. But my recommendation is to leverage those relationships. Look to old bosses that you've had great experiences with, or that have larger networks that you do. You have to utilize all of your bells and whistles, whether it's, optimizing your LinkedIn profile, searching differently, being more thoughtful about your reach outs. It's multifaceted. There's no one answer fits all here.
Right.
But I do think that we have to be more thoughtful about how we're doing it, the vehicles that we're using to reach out, and most importantly, to maintain those relationships. And for those folks that have worked for managers that maybe they haven't spoke with in 3 to 4 years, this is when those things become critically important. As a kind of a good habit I've developed for myself over the last 5 years, specifically with my business, is I continually reach out to my partners, former bosses and colleagues, even if it's just a quick check-in. How are you? What's happening in your world? Let's get a coffee in a non-pandemic world. Or let's have a quick Zoom call. And I feel like those type of relationships and that constant outreach has helped sustain me. And that would be on the top of my list of things people should be doing.
Well, you said 2 things I want to emphasize: the quick check-in, because people are busy, and the quick Zoom.
That's right.
But I think that's the way to do it. But I also feel, and we've spoken about this in prior conversations, it must be authentic. It can't look as if you're just trolling your own database and it's a random. You had to have had some connection in a good way with that person. Agreed?
100%.
To my next question, which is, the model of your company now, providing this service to companies remotely, I think is brilliant, because everybody, it's no longer, as you mentioned before, one size fits all.
Yeah.
Everything is customized, everything is evolved. And I would think you would go into a company and help them strategize in terms of how to structure the department, and then they can hire an implementer, as you said, afterward. But there's two very different things. One is taking a look at a blank piece of paper and figuring out the right people for the right jobs, what the pay is and how we get them. And then the other is kind of the maintenance part of it. So is that what you found, why your company is as successful as it is because you're providing whatever the company needs?
Yeah. I think that's certainly a part of it. I think what you mentioned is critical. The implementer or executor on the ground that's making sure that they get that talent in is just as critical as, your more strategic senior HR advisor. I think both roles are equally important. And the benefit to working with a company like mine, working with small, mid-sized startup, or I like to say speed up organizations that are moving from stage 1 to stage 2, that are funded, that potentially are profitable, it really is, you call it HR in a box, which I kind of love, but I also call it HR light, LITE. We step in, it's like we're not giving you full throttled HR executive, full, pay bonus, huge hit to your bottom line. We come in, we build budgets around the client that work for them, and we give them the HR resources that they need, or the talent resources they need. And instead of maybe bringing someone in full time to handle that, they look to my firm to work that through, and we make arrangements on specific assignments, 3 months, 6 months, 12-month retainers, whatever work for them. And what I have found, especially in these small to mid-sized startup or speed ups, private equity and VC firms love people like me, because I am saving them a significant amount of money. They're like, and if they're preparing for an event, say they eventually do want to go public or be acquired,
right,
having a flat executive team without a huge blown up number for bonus and base salary and benefits and fringe and everything else, I don't have any of that.
right.
We could plug and play. I come in, I stay as long as you need. You could turn me on, you could turn me off. It
Right.
works well. And that's really how my model has evolved. And that's where I continue to get business.
Yeah, that's so smart. Do you find that with Black Lives Matter that companies are truly making that they're wanting to change, and companies are truly being authentic about wanting to increase the ranks with more diverse people of color, or is it still a one and done type of thing? I mean, you're on the front line of this and advising people, and it goes to what you said earlier about you can't not afford not to have someone like you. So what's your take?
I want to say yes and no. And I want to be completely transparent about this, because what I'm finding is, with the explosion of everything that's happened around Black Lives Matter, companies are absolutely in reactionary mode in many cases, because they're ill prepared. They have board members that are primarily white and male. They have no senior management with people of color, whether Black or Latino, and it's a huge challenge. So everyone, it seems very reactionary to me. What I'm finding is companies that have always been committed to hiring in a diverse way around diversity, equity, inclusion are in a good spot, because they've already laid the groundwork. So their numbers might be low, their percentages might be low, but the mechanisms have already been put in place and they've already made the commitment, and they're still working on it. I think transparency is critical, especially in businesses. I have a client within the beauty space that there's been sites that have been put up where our companies are being asked to show their numbers blindly, show your percentages. And if you don't, then you're hiding something. And so they're being asked to put up what do your numbers look like for POC? What does that look like? And the companies that are being less truthful than others, their information is being leaked by employees who are saying, I work at this company, and that's just not true. We have no people of color. We have no Asians. We have no females above a manager level. And they're being called out in a major way on these Instagram sites that have huge social followings, and it's critical. So my first recommendation to companies that are looking to retain me to help them with this movement and with making things right is transparency. and it's going to your employees first and foremost and saying, this is where we're at. We know we have a lot of work to do. This is our commitment. And then showing an action plan of what you're going to do to get there. Because if you just say yes, 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 you're just talking the talk. It's lip service.
Right.
We know working out here in LA and Hollywood that a lot of times is the way it goes. Really digging below the surface, and I want to see the rubber hit the road here. Tell me what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
What affinity groups have you partnered with? What minority enrolled colleges are you trying to develop a relationship with to post jobs, to get people in?
Right.
And I feel like there are a lot of companies that are completely on board with that, and they're reaping the benefits of that. And they're developing and growing into this much more diverse workforce. Some companies say they want to do it and are taking baby steps, but they're not there yet. And I don't want the moment to pass. I feel like this is a real opportunity. And I know for myself, growing up in New York City and being part of my own minority group in the LGBTQ plus community, the struggles I felt in the 80s and 90s entering the workforce, when being part of that community was just completely dangerous and closed a lot of doors. And so I think the struggle is there. It continues to be there. And there are companies that are 100% behind it. But I do feel there are those that say they want to be there and are saying yes, 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 but have done very little to get there. So
Right.
Unfortunate, but still lots of work to do.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, some companies, they may not even know how to start or
True.
where to reach out or how to start that, which is where someone like you would come in.
Correct.
Because, and also there's a bit of shame associated with it as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why didn't we do this sooner? Or why didn't we do this earlier? I want to go back to something you just mentioned about the LGBTQ community. What about that? Are you having to educate people in terms of the terminology that people like to use now to identify themselves? I would imagine that's part of the whole HR structure as well.
It is indeed. And it's funny enough because during, with the death of Mr. Floyd, with the cops and everything that happened as a result of that, my husband and I attended a rally in West Hollywood, a peaceful demonstration where people were talking and there were some incredible speakers. And I met a group of transgendered individuals that were speaking about equality, and they were minorities or people of color. And I felt I was being educated. Now here I am, a 47-year-old male who's been gay since birth, and I thought I knew everything about my communities and how to address and what nouns, pronouns, adjectives to use, all of that fun stuff. And I felt like I was being schooled by these individuals. And I thought, wow, I know very little about my sisters and brothers within this community, and I need to educate myself. And so I did, and had some terrific dialogue around that with these individuals who were kind enough to educate me. Because part of the issue we're running into here as well, even with the Black Lives Matter movement, when I've spoken to any friends or colleagues that are of color, specifically Black, they're like, our job is not to educate you. Like, you need to do this yourself. Like, don't look to us for the answers. Like, we'll certainly help guide you along the way, but don't come to us and be like, help. No, figure it out. Do your reading. Reach out. And like you said, I think there is a little bit of shame involved with being unwoke, so to speak, and not being educated on the topic. And I do feel like there is so much out there. There's a lot of conflicting data. It's ever evolving. So that's where people like myself and my organization step in, and we say, these are the things you should be addressing, and this is the manner in which you address them today. Right. This could change a week from now, but this is where we're at right now. And the same can be said for the LGBTQ plus community, which keeps changing. They keep adding, letters to the LG. When I first came out, it was just LGB, maybe T. And I feel like it keeps adding. And there's a plus sign. I'm thinking, and a lot of people are kind of standing still because they're paralyzed because they don't want to misspeak. Right. And I'm like, did I not include someone? I certainly don't want to offend anyone. My intention is heartfelt, and let's do this correctly. So I think that's another benefit of working with a company like mine to help navigate those waters, so we don't feel like we are misstepping along the way.
Right. Well, and it's a good point. You are afraid. You're so afraid you're going to say the wrong thing. And what I've learned is they know we are going to say the wrong thing, but unless we try, and it is always changing. You're right, and they're always adding new letters, but that's okay too. Just the fact we're talking about this now, to me, is like a major step. So
100%. I am in total agreement with you there.
Yeah, I think that's great. Um, Also, in addition to helping companies, I mentioned before that you also help individuals with job
Hmm.
placement. And as you know, I wrote that do it yourself self help guide 27 tips. And I'm
Love
just
it.
curious, what was there a tip in there? I'd love to know. Was there one thing or a couple of things that you saw that you're like, I never thought of that? So I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah.
Let's talk about resumes for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I listen. I think well, number one, I think the document is tremendously helpful, and I think every university should give them out to students that are entering the workforce. Truly, a document like this around resumes and in just writing and pitfalls to avoid is so critically important, especially to people that this is their entree into the professional workforce. For people like myself or you, Madeline, that have been doing this for a while, it might seem second nature, but again, it might not be. So some of the tips that I really gravitated towards in your document were the perfect spelling and grammar it, to me is table stakes. However, it's not
Mhm.
because I still get resumes in bios that are just I don't I'm having a really difficult time wrapping my head around who did this or did they not review this or look at it before it was sent out.
Right?
Blows my mind.
Blows my mind. Me
And the
too.
one thing, one of the takeaways from your document, which I found very helpful, was the bullets aspect.
Hmm.
Listen, we are a society that, as you know, we we absorb or we are surrounded by media, instant gratification, whether it's the TMZs, whether it's the this, like this is where we're getting our news. It's boom, 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 boom. Having a resume with bullets is critical. It's a snapshot. The way that we receive this information, it's just changed as a society. We don't sit and watch hour-long programs. Everything is
Right.
on speed up mode.
It's
We don't
true.
read paragraphs. Give us bullets. And the no periods thing, hallelujah, you called it out. It's not a sentence, people. It's a bullet. There's a
Right.
difference. No periods. But
Right.
again, it's so elementary reading it. I'm like, but yet everyone does it, Madeline. So that's a great call that I went on your side.
That's funny.
And the last two things I specifically that irk me slightly are the email address. Okay, if we're really worried about showing our age or feeling like we've been in the workforce too long and we're using a Hotmail or an Earthlink email address, we have bigger issues. And I feel like contemporize yourself, get on board, get yourself a professional email address, slap that on your resume. And the last piece I had around age is the education piece. Put your year of graduation. It's eventually going to come out. Don't hide that.
Right.
Because in a world of social media where everyone has access to everything, whether it's through LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or whatever other professional affiliation you might be online with, that information is easily findable. So don't do that. Put it on there and be
Right.
proud of it. You've
I
earned it.
agree. I told people, a recruiter told me once a long time ago, and I always remember this, if you don't put the year, you're either too young or too old. And they'll
That's
find
right.
out. That's their job.
That's where you gravitate towards. And that might not be the case at all. You might just want to keep it, you think it looks better that way, but don't do that. Put the years in there, show it. And I've even gone as far if people have when I'm looking at resumes, because I do look at a lot of them, regardless of when you've entered the workforce or when you graduated college, if you graduated summa cum laude or magna cum laude from a university, like a 3.75 or higher GPA, put
Mhm.
it on there. There's
Right.
no harm in adding that. That just shows that you crushed it when you were a student and were focused on it. If anything, it just adds to maybe it's a conversation piece like, huh, how did you graduate Summa from Georgetown? Like, I know the curriculum is very challenging. Like, what did you do to differentiate yourself? That can lead to a whole other discussion
Right.
that maybe you wouldn't be open to in a normal interview process.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Is there something, have you seen a consistent mistake that many people make over and over? And is there one thing that just stands out, which you're like, above all else, please don't do this? Because you want someone to stand out in a good way and not in a bad way. So I'm going to give you two questions. One, is there something someone can do that makes them stand out in a good way? And what's the one biggest mistake that they should avoid?
Both great questions. The avoid things. I don't want a picture. We don't work in Europe. Stop putting your headshot in. And you're not going up for a role. So I don't need your bio one sheet with what roles you've been. I don't care. That has no place. So I feel like that's a big pitfall. Avoid that. You don't need to do that.
All right.
The one thing and another thing I would say, the headshot thing, not necessary. And again, it's the overshare. In your very helpful handy dandy guide, which I'm actually going to print out and laminate and put in my office because I feel like it's critical just to refer to. It's so helpful. It truly is the number of pages. I get resumes that are 3-4 pages. I'm like, well, what is this? What is this spacing? Like, the idea of having a 1 or a 2-page resume completely resonates with me. And I've worked for headhunters over the years, including a well-known retained search firm in New York City, who the founder had always said to me, I don't want to see anything more than 2 pages. I don't care who you are. And if you're at a C level, it should be a 1-page bio at that point. Like that to me is just wasteful. It's not, I'm uninterested. You're going to lose my interest. And I think there's a lot of truth to be had there. So I do think the positive change, or what people are doing, I think that I've really gravitated towards, given the technology that's out there, a lot of people have embraced using resume forms to help them formulate their document. I think there are a lot of options out there. Some are good, some are not so good. But the fact is, a lot of people aren't just trying to tackle it alone and putting all of this information there on a blank piece of paper. They're actually using a structure with sections and keeping it clean. I think that's a super positive step. And we have to remember, resumes are supposed to act as a snapshot of what's happening in your world. It's not the full story. That happens when you sit down for the interview. This is to get someone's attention. It is a snapshot, and we need to remember that. So I don't need in your current job to have 12 bullets. 6 might be okay.
Right, exactly.
You know what? And then you get into those conversations, and then you can discuss the other things that you may not have highlighted. That comes out, again, organically, naturally during the course of the conversation. But don't overdo it with information. The information overload is probably the most dangerous thing you could do.
Right. I so agree. I always say it's not your life story. It's a chronology of key points that you've done during your career.
That's right.
But I think people think this document is everything, and they put so much emphasis on the resume. And I'm only like, it's only to get you the interview. This is just the first step.
Highlights, successes, quick wins, affiliations, achievements, like call these things out in a way that is going to get someone's attention, because that's going to differentiate you, in a pile of papers that's this high with resumes, of what's going to put you at the top from the other 10 that have the same backgrounds, the same years of experience, and the same educational pedigree.
So much that we depend on our gut. Have you had an experience where, speaking of resumes, that you've seen someone and they have looked maybe not so great on paper, or maybe they were stumbled a bit during the interview, but you just have this gut instinct there that they were the right person for the job, and you went out on a limb and you took a chance and you hired them, and then they just like crushed it. Do you have an example of that? And maybe also the other way, where someone looked great on paper and they seemed like the exact fit, and then for whatever reason, it wasn't the right thing?
I think both. I will say this. What I have found, especially if I see a resume that catches my eye for a position, and this worked specifically for me when I was working in-house for big companies that were looking to fill certain positions. A lot of times I would see a resume that caught my eye, and I'm like, I want to bring in that person. And then the person doing the screening under me might say, what about the resume do you like? I'm like, there's something about the resume that I like. There is that gut instinct. It could be completely off topic. It might not be someone who grew up through the marketing or sales rank, but you see something or a job that they've worked at that is either a tough environment, you've been successful in it, there must be thick-skinned, how do they do it? And I want to know more. Like that's the whole point. The resume it's supposed to leave you wanting more. Like, I want to know more about this person, so I want to call them in. And what I have found is I meet with these individuals, and the most helpful part about it is kind of probing a little bit into their background, whether it was the way they were raised, how, the companies that they chose to work for. And I love hearing the story, because it's more about their thought process of how they've got from A to B. It's not so much the actual result of it. I just wanted to know what steps they put in to get there. That to me is more critical. I want to see where their critical thinking is and where their decision-making comes from. And I feel like more times than not, I always trust my gut. If I see a resume and something stands out, whether it's the way the resume was presented to me, whether it's a company that they've worked for that I know turns out top talent, I immediately bring them in, and I'm like, I want to talk a little bit about this. Tell me about your experience here. Like, I want to know why you did this, why you stuck it out. I use as an example, I knew someone who started out in the mailroom at CAA and kind of grew into a more senior role at another talent agency that we won't speak about. And I'm like, how the hell did you last in the mailroom for 5 years? I know it is churn and burn. I know it is political. I know it is this, this, and this. Like, what did you do to be successful there? Because people revolve in and out of there in weeks, not months, not years.
Sure.
What about you? And those are the stories that I want. Those are the nuggets that really help me build candidate pools or profiles based on where they've come from. And when I'm selling that to a client and they come to me and they're like, why this resume? I'm like, let me tell you why. You need to meet this person. This is what I've uncovered. This was their experience. Trust me on this. You won't be disappointed. And 9 times out of 10, they've ended up being successful and they fit. They just fit the profile, even though on paper, they may not look like the profile fit.
Right.
On the other side of that, as you mentioned, it's the individuals. Yeah.
Hang on just one second before we go to the other side. So just to clarify, it's okay to have had some adversity. Like that's the story, that's the texture that makes you different than other people. The fact that maybe it was tough in the mailroom for 5 years and how you overcame that, or maybe you had a very difficult boss. So maybe there's a way of saying it without trashing your prior company or your boss, but to say like, this is what happened, this is what I endured, and this is how I came through it.
That's right. I want to hear the story. And that's it. I mean, listen, there's never mistakes. There's only learnings. And it's something that's preparing you for the next step in your professional career or just personally. And I feel like I look at organizations that have a very tough culture that is either hair's on fire all the time. It's quick turnarounds. It's long hours. And I look at these individuals and those people, when I sit with them and they're telling me their story about not only surviving in those environments, but thriving, I look at them as not only survivors, but hard workers that are thinking through the political landscape of how to be successful and not being affected by any of the naysayers or the negativity or the swirl or static that's around you. I love the resiliency that shows.
I agree.
And I feel like I gravitate towards those people wholeheartedly, or those candidates, because I feel like, tell me a little bit about it. It's okay if you stumbled. I want to know more about the recovery. That's worth more to me than anything.
Yeah, I love it. All right. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay. Back
no, not at all.
What happens when you see someone that looks like they're a complete 100% great fit, and then they get there and it turns out that there's just more.
And it happens a lot. And I feel like the unfortunate, one of the challenges that we face, I think, as talent kind of partners or HR leaders is the referral aspect of things. A lot of times when you're working for very senior executives, they throw resumes at you or give you referrals of, hey, I know so-and-so, and their child is looking for an opportunity, or they have a new graduate that they want to promote. And, out of courtesy, will absolutely speak to anyone and hope that they're a fit somewhere within the organization, or maybe somewhere else that you have a connection with in whatever industry that individual might be looking to enter into. The unfortunate part is I feel like many times it's a little bit of like a forced hand, like we need to find an opportunity for this person, or let's what could we do here? And I feel like a lot of effort is put into working with these individuals where after maybe reviewing their resume or after meeting with them, you think, I wouldn't put them through any further in this process because they're not a fit. Maybe they don't have the background that we need to have they won't be a successful person in this role because they don't have this yet, or they need more of this. And I feel like it's part of what we deal with every day. And you may have someone who looks on the opposite side of that. You may have someone who looks fantastic on paper, has worked for the right companies, has the right educational pedigree, if that's what the role is calling for, and they get in and then they just flop. And I've seen that happen more often than not too. And I think that's where the interview process for me is more critically important than ever. You can have IQ for days. If the EQ is not there, and that incredibly important, tangible culture fit, and everyone talks about culture, and they throw the word around like it's, to me, it's just as important as having, the scientific background or the talent or the skills that you need to be successful in a role from a technical expertise.
Right.
Culture to me is everything. I know for myself, I grew up in the media, entertainment, and technology spaces. And that has served me well. It has served my personality well. But I look at organizations like banking, or I look at organizations like the legal profession, where there are huge opportunities, especially at the senior HR and strategic HR level. And I'm reached out to often for like chief HR roles at big law firms. And I think, oh, I would fail in 2 minutes. Like I just, personality wise, I know where my strengths are, and I know where my personality is received well and works well and partners well with others. Not to say I couldn't make a go of it. I just know that there would be a set of challenges there for me that I've not certain I'd want to tackle.
Right.
And I think having that self-awareness, I think, is critically important when you're applying to jobs. And on the other side of that, the person that's doing the interviewing or the screening for that person needs to be equally aware of that very important piece. On the other side of that, if you're in a strict sales environment, I know a lot of times people will want to see, or people have asked in sales organizations to see W-2s from the year prior. Like if you're telling me that you are a salesperson that makes $85,000 a year, but last year you made $400,000, you need to show me how. And it happens a lot. And I'm going back to the days of publishing, Madelyn, when things were a bit different, and things were good and money was being made. I think there are instances where that has been called into, not called into question, but just to verify. Mm-hmm. And I think in today's day and age, with all of the rules and restrictions around asking and what can and can't be shared, companies are finding ways around that. And I've seen this even online, filling out job applications or applying for jobs online. Expected salary. It's just very funny. So they're not asking you how much you make, but they're asking you what to expect. I'm like, well, what the hell's the difference? I'm like, yeah. It's like the shell game. It's like, so I think companies are trying to be very clever about that. And what I advise all of my employees, or all of my individuals that I work with to do when they're looking for jobs and those kind of questions are asked online or in person, is that you're open. And I don't give a number. I don't, because my fear is the job might be budgeted for $200,000 and you're making 120. If you come in and say I'm making 120, well, they're going to offer you 125. I don't think you need to offer that up. I think you need to say you're open based on your experience. You expect something that's commensurate to what you're bringing to the table. That is it. And I try and keep it as kind of vague as possible. And if they're probing a little more, I would, respectfully or gently push back on it. I don't think it's something that should be asked at all. I truly don't. And I know that it still is asked, but there's a way to kind of work around if you can.
Do you think, just one last thing on that, there's websites which give you comp salaries, and particularly for women that sometimes have been underpaid for, naturally especially for women that have been underpaid. I don't need to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
If you're making, I'll just say, if you're making 100,000, but you go into a website and see that the comps are 150, can you give the comp if you are probed? Because at least it'll get you to where you should be, so you're not constantly in this game of trying to play catch up. What's your thought on that?
I think there's a few things. I think especially larger organizations that have kind of more full-bodied HR functions, where maybe there's a comp or executive comp benefit component to the HR structure internally. A lot of times I have found employees, especially when I worked at larger media companies, employees will come in and respectfully ask for a comp analysis because they feel like they're under market. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, at least it's been my experience, the research will be done. And many times it comes back and they are under market. I think it happens a lot with individuals as well who stay at an organization for, I like to say, too long. Say you came in as a marketing manager and you're now a director, but you've been with the company for 9 or 10 years, and you're seeing people being hired in at much higher levels or much higher pay rates than you are. You're a little bit of a victim of staying at the dance a little too long. But I do think not encouraging people to leave, especially if they feel like they're still learning and growing within their role. But that's the opportunity that they need to take with their HR leadership to say, hey, I feel like I'm significantly under market. And you could share whatever market data you've found. And any HR department that is interested in working with you and keeping you happily employed will do that research and come back to you and say, you know what, you're right. We're going to make a market adjustment. We're going to do whatever it is to get you there, which I feel happens quite often. I will say, in the COVID world in which we're living in, My fear is that as we kind of continue to evolve through this pandemic, with the largest unemployment rate that we've ever seen in our history, probably that we'll ever see, the onslaught or currency of candidates that are out there looking for work is going to be staggering. And I do think there are going to be those companies that try and get people in the door because there's so many people looking for work at 20 to 30% below market because they can. That's not to say they'll keep those individuals when the market starts to churn and level out, because those people are going to hop ship immediately and say, you know what, I'm way under market. Companies are hiring here correctly. And I hope companies don't go to that model, but I am fearing that there are some individuals or some organizations out there that are going to gravitate towards that. And that to me spells disaster.
Right. But I also think some of the companies that are paying less, Angelo, they're forced to pay less because they haven't made money for 3 months. Their budgets are cut.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is like, we're in a, I don't think that they're necessarily exploiting individuals, although I'm sure some are. But I also think we're just in dire straits. And I know I have friends that work at companies that they're like, I don't know how, we're just barely hanging on by a thread. So hiring individuals, they've got to have the people, but they can't pay the big fat salaries that they did in the past.
And to your point, I agree with that. Some of the companies I've worked for, in lieu of layoffs, have cut from the executive level down percentage-wise. So if you are, say the CEO took a 40% pay cut, which a lot of cases they've done. The next tick down, your executive vice presidents, senior vice presidents have taken 25% pay cuts. The directors have taken 10 to 15% pay cuts, and so on and so forth. And what that's allowing is the team to stay whole. Sure. No one, maybe people aren't being furloughed, maybe aren't people being laid off. They might be making a smaller amount in their salary, but they're working. They have their benefits. They're still trying to build. I think companies that are fortunate enough to use that model, I think, are ultimately going to win out. The individuals that have come in and had to furlough as a result of economics or everything else, I think that the rebuilding there is going to be that much tougher. I do.
I agree. Well, gosh, I know we ran a little bit over, guys. I apologize for that. Angelo, I could talk to you all day.
Same. Thank you.
And thank you for your time, and thanks for all the great work.